Hey everyone, and welcome to the Build the Church podcast, where we equip pastors to gain momentum, grow their churches, and go the distance in ministry. I am your host, Josh Roberie, and today I am very, very excited to dive into a topic that I think is on a lot of people's minds. It's something I think about a lot, and that is, should your church be using generative AI? And the AI conversation has taken off, and I am no stranger to it, have jumped into this. I feel like it was early on, but the more I look into it, I realize people have been into it a lot longer than I have. But for the last couple of years, I've really tried to do my best to learn as much as I can about AI so I can help other churches utilize this technology. And I think what I've learned is that there's also some dangers involved with it. There's some things we need to be aware of. And so what I want to do over the course of the next 20 minutes or so as we talk about this is we're going to walk through the history of technology in the church and unpack exactly what generative AI is, explore some real world examples of how you can use it in your ministry. We're going to wrestle with the ethical and the practical concerns because I think there are some. I think there's some things we need to consider. And then finally, I think there's a conclusion we got to come to. Are we going to use this or not? Is it worth the hassle? Is it worth all the different things that come along with it? And so we're going to talk about that. I'll share my conclusion at the end. But before we talk about algorithms and chatbots, let's remember past technologies and how they've reshaped our mission as a church. And I think when you look back over history, first, I think a good example that we can look at is the Roman roads. I want you to picture yourself in the first century on these roads that they were built for warfare. The Romans had built this to transport troops and to use it to help conquer the world and bring the resources back. But what happened is these roads were built right at the best possible time in human history for the gospel to be spread. And this technology ended up being utilized to spread the gospel around the world, the known world at the time. So Paul hopped on these roads and he planted churches from Antioch to Rome. And if we fast forward, we look in Gutenberg's printing press. And whenever the printing press was created, the first thing that was printed on this technology was what? The Bible. Anyone could own a Bible instead of just relying on a single handwritten copy located in a monastery. And you know what happened with the printing press is the church got really nervous. They got really afraid that people would get their hands on this and it would lead people away from the church, that they would begin reading things that they shouldn't read and it would take them away. So every time there's been a technology that's come out, there's been a little wrestling that has to happen. There's been the opportunity for it to be used for good or not good. And that's something we need to be aware of. But what happened with the printing press is the scripture spread across Europe like a wildfire. And that's what happened. I think of a big disruption that's happened in my lifetime before AI, and that is the internet. I mean, the internet changed everything. I watched the clip the other day from the Today Show, and Gumbel and Katie Couric, and then they were on there. They didn't know what the internet was. They didn't know what email was. And they were talking about, like, what is this? Can someone explain to me how this works and what this is? And that sound that whenever we would log on to the internet into the 90s, and if you picked up the phone, it would kick you off the internet. Someone would come out the room screaming, "Hey, I'm on the internet," And, it was fun times. But in the 90s, dial-up connections felt futuristic. Now we can live stream services. We can host prayer. I've been in prayer rooms that we've been praying around the world with people, global prayer rooms. Through COVID, we used Zoom and other technologies to keep the gospel going. Now we have virtual small groups. My aunt-in-law, Amy's aunt, does a small group, and they bring in this device, and they can continue having a small group with people who have moved away through the internet. But the internet, it's been a host for a lot of evil. It's been a host for a lot of bad things as well. But the truth is when the church hasn't run away from this technology, but has embraced the technology, we've been able to harness AI for a brighter future for the church. And what I like to say is that the AI train has left the station. AI is out there, this generative artificial intelligence. It's out doing its thing. And so what our question is will we harness AI, or will we let our fear stall our next leap forward as a church, capital C church? So what is generative AI? If you've chatted with ChatGPT, you've met generative AI, but what's under the hood? Okay. So the way ChatGPT and this generative AI work is it uses data and patterns. AI isn't magic. It's complex math, statistical models trained on terabytes of text, images, and codes. It learns patterns and then predicts what comes next. And what can happen is it can almost feel miraculous as you're using it because it can predict even what you're about to say because it's working off so much data that it feels like it's predicting the future, but really it's just continuing a pattern, and it almost feels miraculous when you use it in a way that it can really flex its muscles. And so what a lot of people end up using with AI, when I talk about AI and generative AI, we're talking about large language models or natural language processing. And that's the branch of generative AI that enables it to understand and generate human language. When we type a prompt, you're actually triggering layers of neural networks to fetch the most likely words and sentences and bring it back. And that's what's caused AI to take off is ChatGPT. We've had AI for a long time. Anytime you're using a spell checker or you're using Google, you're using AI, but it's this ability to interact with it that's caused it to take off. And that's the generative part. Unlike older algorithms that only analyze, this generative tech creates blog posts. It can create songs. I mean, I remember when I was first learned it in June of 2023. That's when one of the first ways I was introduced to it was someone was showing me how it can make songs about anything. And we would laugh at these songs that it would create or these stories that it would tell based on a few prompts. But it can create sermon outlines. It could even create artwork. And think of it this way. When you use generative AI, you're hired a research assistant who never sleeps, never complains, and knows a bit about almost everything. That's AI. Okay. So now that we understand a little bit about what it is, the history of it, history of technology in the church, let's talk a little bit about the benefits of your ministry. How can AI benefit you as a ministry? So let me paint a picture of how AI could work in the church this week: message, research, and prep. Okay. And there's a lot of ways to look at this. Imagine you're preaching on Esther. You ask AI, give me the historical context of Persian court politics under Xerxes. Now, instead of having to go and research that, even find the right books, find the right context, you can prompt it to ask that question based on your doctrine and belief system. You can put in that context, hey, I'm a non-denominational, charismatic, or I'm a whatever denomination in this branch of that denomination, and it will give you an answer based on that. In 2 seconds, you've got bullet points on the Persian society, throne succession, and cultural tensions. I did this a couple of years ago. I was preaching on the book of Daniel in Babylon. So instead of having, which I'm a reader, I think if you're like me and you do research already and you're a great researcher and you love to read, this doesn't take that away. It turns that up times a million. It makes your research that much more powerful because instead of starting at 0, you're starting at 1,000, and you can spend the same amount of time doing this amazing work, but now you're bringing in sources and perspectives you would never have. And that's what I did. I got all this research on Babylon because I knew the scriptures in Daniel. I'd studied Daniel. If you preach, you're going to cover Daniel at some point. But now I could bring in all this historical context through AI, and it helped me tremendously in that message. And so here's the impact. Your sermon gains depth. You spend less time scouring commentaries and more time crafting applications. And so that's what I like to think, is that you shouldn't look at AI as a way to get your messages done quicker. You should look at AI as a way to make your messages stronger, because you're spending less time looking up the sources and data that's right at your fingertips now. And now you can spend more time working with the information that you actually want to work with. If you've ever done a research paper, there's a big portion, the majority of your time is not spent writing the paper. It's an overwhelming 2/3 of the time is spent researching, finding the information. Now that happens in a split second. Another great way it can help you is creative brainstorming. For example, you need an engaging illustration for Philippians 4:6. Do not be anxious about anything, You can type in a prompt, suggest 3 modern everyday scenarios that illustrate anxious worry turned into peace. And then it comes back a parent prepping kids for a school presentation, a small business owner waiting on a loan approval, a student facing a final exam. You can ask it to give you perspectives of the audience you're going to speak to make sure that you're not just speaking to someone just like you. Our churches are more diverse than ever, which is an amazing thing, but it means as a communicator, you don't just need to communicate from your perspective in your life. You need to worry about the people and their perspectives, and you can ask AI to bring that information to you. A follow-up, you can ask, how could I tie each scenario back to prayer, Thanksgiving, and God's peace? And boom, you've got a mini outline with 3 sermon points. You say, well, you need to be reading the Bible and researching yourself. Yeah, of course. Obviously, you need to be doing that. You need to be diving into the word. You need to be praying through it. You need to have a foundation of utilizing commentaries and trusted tools that are going to make your messages stronger. That doesn't mean that you should stop there. I always say, once you get the content, that's step 1. Now I need to put that into a feedback loop. I need to put it in a flywheel where now I'm adding creative insight. I'm adding diversity insight, meaning people with different stages of life and different backgrounds than me. And I'm developing that message out, and AI should be part of that process at this point moving forward. Okay, so let's look at another way you can use it as a church. And a lot of you are already doing this, and that's social media and content. And what I like to say is AI should make your messages stronger, and they should make your messages last longer. So I say AI can help you stretch and strengthen your message, or strengthen and stretch your message. So you spend all this time writing a message. Now you can take AI and you can say, hey, take this section that I feel is a good section of my message and turn it into a 60-second script that I can use to record on Instagram. And boom, you post a reel after that week, after you share your message on Monday, Tuesday, recapping an important part. Say, hey, I want to touch on this part of the message, and you share that. And all of a sudden, what you've done is you've used AI to instantly create content for your church that you've already prayed over, that you've already fasted over, that you've already invested your time into, but it instantly helps you make it go further instead of it just dying on the shelf because it was last week's message. You can turn it into blog posts. You can turn it into even content, carousel content, where you scroll through the slides on Instagram. You can say, hey, take this section of my message and turn it into an Instagram carousel post that I want it to be 10 slides long. And you can tell it, I want it to end like this, start like this. Help me come up with a catchy way to title this section of my message in that post. And even it'll write that out. Okay. So it can help you. There's a ton of other ways it can help you. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to get into all of it right now because we're going to be talking about AI a lot on this podcast, and we'll share some more things later. But let's take a look now at what are the risks, what are the warnings, and I guess the question is AI hijacking modern ministry? And sometimes I wonder, if we're allowing AI to hijack modern ministry, are we just turning ourselves, are we abdicating our control, our creativity over to AI? And there's a lot of discussion happening with that, not just in the church world, but in any place that involves creativity or putting output. And I heard someone say something recently along the lines of, I want AI doing my math and my data entry. I don't want it, writing my books and painting my paintings and creating my images. We need to keep doing that. We need to be in the driver's seat. But what we want to do is we want to have a good research assistant that can help us do a better job than we could on our own. So there are some risks and there are some warnings. Every hammer can become a nail in the wrong hands, right? So you can take a hammer and you can use it properly, or you can use it and you can hurt yourself. If you've ever hit your thumb with a hammer, you know that a hammer can be used in multiple ways. So here's some things we need to be concerned about. First of all, super important is privacy and security. Never paste sensitive data from your church members into AI. Never put your personal data into AI or prompts. What you want to do is you always want to treat what you put in there as a prompt the same way as what you would want to find out about you or others online. So the way I look at it is, if I can't Google and find that information about myself or others online, I don't put that information into ChatGPT or any AI platform, because it becomes public data at that point that they learn from, that they use. There's people behind the scenes that are going to read it. And so what you want to do is keep in mind, if I wouldn't want to find this about myself or other people on Google, don't put it in AI. Now, I have access to private AI channels, and you can pay for that, right? You can get that problem taken care of by purchasing certain levels of these generative AI platforms, these large language models, where you can put that information in. But keep that in mind. Another thing that people, I guess, sometimes are just not aware of is that it hallucinates, and AI sometimes hallucinates facts. Once had to invent a quote from St. Augustine: always cross-check every quotation and statistic, especially in theological context, where I had to go back and say, hey, is that exactly, did he actually say that? And so anytime I ask for a quote, I go back and try to verify that. I don't try, I have to verify that. I verify it online or through a book or something like that first, especially when you're asking for a quote from a modern person. Sometimes you say, well, I can't find it, but maybe they did say it. No, you cannot take that risk. There's a story of when ChatGPT first came out, of some lawyers who, when they were citing their case, they used ChatGPT and said, hey, give me references for all this. And all the cases that they cited in this big New York case that they were working on, they submitted it to the judge and the other lawyers they were against. And the other lawyers looked and said, none of these cases even existed. And what happened was AI hallucinated and made up cases that would support these other lawyers' perspective on the case. And you can imagine how well that went for those lawyers. And so why does it hallucinate? It wants to please you. It wants to make you happy. It wants to give you the answers you're looking for. And so if it can't find it, it'll literally make it up, and it'll look so real because it follows those patterns. Okay. Another thing you need to be worried about when it comes to AI is that it's biased. And which I think this is funny. I see preachers do this sometimes. They'll ask it a theological question, and when it confirms your perspective on it, they post that. Even ChatGPT agrees with me. Well, that's because you've been using it and it's now trained in your perspective. So if I ask it what's the best philosophy for life, it's going to tell me, well, of course, a Christian philosophy where Jesus is at the center, because it knows that's what I want to hear. So it is biased. And then outside of that, if you get into a political sphere or you get into something outside the church, I find that it has a strong leaning a certain way, and I'll even have to call it out. And when I do, it'll correct itself, but it definitely has a bias. And so when you're reading it, you need to be critical when you analyze it. So you can't just copy and paste. Another thing is that I feel like a lot of people are losing their voice and their authenticity because of AI. They are copying and pasting on social media. They're copying and pasting in their messages. And we don't want to outsource your pulpit presence to AI. AI is a great resource. It's a terrible driver. It's a great co-pilot. We want to give it our outlines and have it point holes in it and help us make our outlines better. When you copy and paste onto social media, you lose your authenticity. Now you can type what you want to post and put that into ChatGPT and have it work on that, and then you take that and you own it from there and rewrite it. But basically the problem is that AI is terrible in the driver's seat. It's a wonderful co-pilot. We want to leave you in the driver's seat and AI in the passenger seat. And when you do that, you keep your voice, you keep your authenticity, and you get all the power of AI. And then I think the other thing that ends up happening is when you become over-reliant on AI, if you let it do all your writing, you lose that skill. You dull your own creative muscles. And what I think you should do is you should always keep, as a pastor, as a minister who's writing messages, writing lessons, writing content, you need to flex your writing muscle. You need to stretch yourself in that area. You need to write things out, and you need to allow AI, which is how I use it, to strengthen what I'm already writing, not to write stuff for me. Okay. And so to me, I use AI to write stuff for me when I want to do something really quick, like a quick email, quick text message. But when I'm delivering something to God's people, or I'm creating something for someone else, like even this podcast I wrote this and it's been refined and reorganized through AI. Okay, I'll use it that way. So If you want to take your first step, you need to find a secure platform. There's plenty of Christian-focused AI tools out there with privacy guarantees. You can look into that. You can begin to build your own prompt library so you can begin to utilize it and practice with it. And one of the questions that Jeff Wood says in his book, The AI-Driven Leader, is, how can AI help me do this? And once I started asking that question, I started asking it for everything and started practicing with it. So literally get in there, save prompts that work well, and then tweak them and redeploy. And then try them with your team. Have your team start experimenting with them. Run a workshop with your team where you try to brainstorm some things and work on some things where you are using AI so your team can get stronger in it and you can learn how you want to use it as a group. Set some guardrails up if you're going to use AI. Create a checklist. Always fact check. Never share private data. Always add your personal insight. Create a checklist that you're going to share with your team if they're going to use AI so that you can make sure you're being consistent in your voice and your authenticity. Everyone's got to have that aha moment if they're going to really buy into using it. And I've definitely have that. I've watched other people have it. I can't wait to share some of those with you. And when I was thinking about relaunching my podcast from Believe Again to Build a Church, there's a lot of things I wanted to talk about. But this is what I'm most excited about. So I think I'm actually going to take a few episodes and talk about AI because it's something I'm really excited about right now. And I think it can really help you. And that leads me to wrap up with my conclusion and encouragement. All right. So generative AI is not a silver bullet, but it's a powerful kingdom tool. It's not a magic wand, but it's a powerful kingdom tool. When we remember that every technology leap from the Roman roads to the printing press to the internet was ultimately used by God to spread the gospel, we can see AI as the next frontier. The truth is that this disruption is happening, and you're not going to be replaced by AI. You're going to be replaced by someone who knows how to use AI. Can you imagine someone today saying, I want to do my job without the internet? That's virtually impossible for most people, especially people in ministry today. You don't do your job without the internet. You've learned how to use the internet to do your job better than you could have without it. We have to use it wisely. We can let it handle our research, our brainstorming, our admin, and those are good things, right? Because we want to continue to pour into people. If I could be allowed to use a few more P words here, pour time into praying, pour time into preaching and pastoring. But we got to guard our voice, check your facts, steward this tool well. And I think you'll be really, really glad you used it. Well, look, this wraps up today's episode. My goal is to keep these about this time length each time. If you enjoyed it, please share it with a friend. Go wherever you listen to podcasts. Give us the 5-star highest rating. Write a review. Like this post. Like it on social media. Share it. We're on Instagram at buildthe.church. So with that, I just want to say thanks for being with us today. I can't wait for you to join us next time. Until then, keep believing and leading strong.